Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope that you are well and safe and looking after yourselves. If you're new here, my name is Emily and I wanted to do a VR to Paper Moon today, and it's the hashtag tarot on the menu, and I've seen a few people do this tag and I've really enjoyed watching everyone's videos. I think it's such a fun tag, and I do believe that it was inspired by Candy, Soul and Soil's hashtag dating the tarot. So before I get on into it, I do have a cat right here purring away who's sort of on my lap distracting me, so if you wonder what's going on, that's what it is. Here is the VR challenge, tarot on the menu prompts, and it says also to make up your own, perhaps a nice side dish. So I have made up a couple, which I thought were kind of fun, that I would consider eating. So let's just get right on into it. So the first prompt is your favorite appetizer, a deck to whet your appetite. So there were a few tarot decks that I felt really fitted this perfectly, but the one I just felt was the most natural for me was the Lightseers Tarot. For me, this deck is just a go-to. I work with this a lot with other people as well as reading for myself. Pretty much everyone in the community knows and loves this deck. It has real cult status, a real following of fans. It's just a beautiful, beautiful deck. The illustrations are stunning and it really depicts all of the meanings so beautifully, and I just think it is a staple deck for me, but it is also one that leaves me wanting more. It's one of the decks that I think of as sort of really starting my, obsession with collecting different decks. So for that reason, I think it just fits here just so beautifully and perfectly. So this is my appetizer to whet your appetite. The next prompt is one that I added, and it is gourmet bread and butter, because I love a good bread basket, and when I was younger I used to work in a French bistro style restaurant, and it had a bistro side and a restaurant side, and they were both quite posh really, but the restaurant side was extra posh, and they used to have these amazing like gourmet breads that they would serve, and they were just the best. So I thought of that. So for me, the gourmet bread and butter is the Lumina Tarot, and that's not just because I have the French version, that just is convenient, but this is the deck I thought of because I just feel like it nourishes me using it, and it just feels delicious. Like, I love it. I have the deck here. I've had this for maybe a month and a half, I want to say, and I picked it up after Simon at the Hermit's Cave did a walkthrough during Quarantine Stream of the independent version of the deck. It's unavailable at the moment, also the shipping is extortionate, and then I found out they had this deck on Amazon.co.uk, which is the French version. So the guidebook, unfortunately, I cannot read because I do not read French, but the deck is just stunning, and I did edge mine as well. I have done a walkthrough of this, which I have not yet uploaded, so I will endeavour to get that uploaded at some point soon. This is a deck that's several years old though, so many people probably are already aware of this and know it well. It's sort of comparable to the Wild Unknown in a way, but I do think that they're quite different. Some of the figures are very body beautiful, but because of the style of art, I don't mind. I just think it's absolutely stunning and so, so beautiful. I just adore this deck so much. There's so much in here that I just feel drawn to, and I get this with bread and butter. Bread is one of my favourite things, and butter as well. Like hot, freshly made bread, butter melting on it. There's something so sensual and sexy and delicious and sumptuous and divine about it, and the eating of it. And I just feel like this deck, to me, it's like it's got that silky, delicious quality of the butter melting into the bread, and I don't know, I'm getting really like into this and now I'm quite hungry as well. But yeah, this deck for me is my gourmet bread and butter. So next up is the French Bistro, an elegant romantic deck. It could only be the Lonely Dreamer Tarot. This is the second edition by M. Wotherspoon, and this is made with art by Odilon Redon, who was a French artist, and this deck is just like a French bistro. It really, look at the backs. It reminds me of like beautiful dark chocolate and boeuf bourguignon and just beautiful like French food. I mean, when I went to Paris with my mum a few years ago, we ate the most amazing food. Like, the food there is just absolutely divine, and I adore French bistros. And as I said, I worked in a French bistro, and the couple who owned it were English, but the chef had trained for years in Paris, and they were listed in the Michelin Guide as well. So it was a beautiful, beautiful restaurant, and I learned so much about French cuisine from them and their business. And I worked for them for several years as a waitress when I was a student, and it was a really enriching job actually, and I really enjoyed it. So for me, this just feels like that. My mum is an art teacher as well, so when I got this deck, I was talking to her about the artist, and she was telling me all about her understanding and what she'd read about the artist and the work and such, and it's just really, really such a beautiful deck. There's so much to delve into here. I think this works really, really intuitively, really, really beautifully. It's just a stunning, stunning deck, and this is my French bistro. Next up is a spicy dish, a deck that adds a little zing to every reading. For this deck, I selected the Witches Insurrection Tarot. This deck I bought maybe 2 years ago, and I just fell in love with it. I love the white space, I love the art, the illustrations, and I love the content. So this is a really adult themed deck. This was created by a ex-sex worker. This is a really kind of authentic, real truth-telling deck. This is peppy, this is spicy, this is sassy, this is unapologetic, this is absolutely advocacy, this is fighting for rights, this is political, this is witchcraft, this is all of these things, and it's such a powerful, hard-hitting deck, and I absolutely adore it. I adore this deck. It is stunning and powerful. This is one of my absolute favourite decks in my entire collection. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful deck, and it really reads beautifully as well. It tells some truths. Definitely a spicy, spicy deck, The Witches Insurrection. This is by Kit Snicket. Next up is Little Italy, a deck that brings to mind a taste tempting pasta. For this, I pulled out the big guns. It is the Visconti de Modrone Tarot. Now this is the very first kind of historical deck that I've ever picked up, and this deck, oh my goodness me. So this is the tarot deck of the Renaissance courts, and it was restored by Mathieu de Org. I hope that's how you say it. Now there are several different versions of this deck by different companies. This is the Lo Scarabeo version that comes in this box, and it says museum quality. It is stunning, it is a masterpiece, really, honestly. But there is a US Games version, I believe, that is cheaper, that doesn't have all of this detail, but it's been restored really, really beautifully, and then it's got this stunning gold and silver foil throughout. And the cards are enormous. Look, this is my face. They are enormous. Absolutely enormous. But this deck, this is Little Italy, but this is not a inexpensive trattoria or osteria. This is, you know, one of those expensive, lavish, beautiful restaurants. Actually, my favourite restaurants in Italy are the little trattorias, but this is something I just melted when I was looking through this, and I hadn't actually used it, I haven't shuffled it. I just want to keep it like this, to be honest. I get this out mostly to look at the art, to study the book, and to learn and appreciate, you know, the origins, and it is just stunning. The one thing is that it doesn't have any gilding on the side, which maybe I will do one day, but I just think it's so beautiful to have this sort of little replica, this kind of piece of history. It's just beautiful. So this is Little Italy. Next up, the meat and potatoes, the trusty main meal deck that sticks to your ribs. For this, I had a few decks I thought of. The Bone Stone was one because it really is like a main meal for me. The Phalakos because it is, again, it's in itself, it's its own system, and it is just this meaty kind of deck. But then I decided to go for a newer deck in my collection, and that is the Mary L. This is a favourite for so many people, this deck. I love this deck because it is actually really, really easy to work with. I love the silver edging. I love the size of it, the way it shuffles. It is beautiful cardstock. This is a second edition, I believe, and it's the second version of the second edition, because I believe the second edition originally came out with different edges. But I ummed and ahed over this deck for such a long time. At first I didn't think I wanted it, but I loved the art and I could not get away from it. I do feel there's a lot in here that I can work through in terms of triggers and trauma, and it's such a beautiful, well-rounded deck. That image there, there's so much romance in it and beauty, but there's also this like peppiness as well. I actually thought about putting this in the spicy dish category as well, because it is spicy and it demands your attention, and it takes work and it takes time to understand this deck and really like delve deep, and this is what I'm doing, you know, and I am absolutely loving working with this deck. This is a rib sticking deck for sure, so that is why I picked it as my meat and potatoes, because this deck will stick to your ribs and I want it to stick to my ribs. I absolutely love this deck. It's just fantastic. I'm so glad I've got it in my collection now. As Paper Moon suggested, I have also included a side dish, and for my side dish I have chosen the Herb Crafters Tarot. I just think that because I often have like green beans or like a side salad, like I just thought Herb Crafters is perfect, and I just love the illustrations, the food. This is so fresh, and I think that Sedna used this as the palate cleanser, which I loved as well, and I think some people use this as like the appetizer because it whets your appetite, and I see that too, both of them. I just love the green in this deck. Oh, it's just absolutely stunning deck, and I love working with this deck alongside the Hedge Witch Botanical Oracle as well. I recently shared my VR to Lisa Papez with the hashtag Perfect Pairs, and I paired this with some other decks as well. I just think it is such a beautiful tarot deck, and I love that it can work kind of as an oracle as well as a tarot deck. It is becoming one of my favourites in my collection. It is out all the time. I use it to inform spellcraft as well as divination, and I just think it is so beautiful. I adore it. So this is my side dish. Next up, I added another category, and one thing that I absolutely love having is something that I don't get to have a lot, but because I write for a living, in the past I have been lucky enough to go to restaurants and do reviews, and we've been given tasting menus, and they are so lovely because you get to try everything, and you have sort of like maybe between like 6 and 10 dishes, and you get little bits of everything, you know, like a tasting platter, tasting menu. They are so much fun. And for the tasting menu I decided to go for the 78 Tarot Elemental. Of course this would work across the board with the other versions of this deck as well. I really would love to get my hands on some of the other versions because the art and all of them is so spectacular, but I just love decks where you get this fusion with different artists. I love the Ostara Tarot for that as well, and I know that some people struggle to like work with a deck or get into a deck, but for instance with the 78 Tarot, because every card is different, I feel that it just works. It just really works. I was lucky enough to win this copy actually from Lisa Papez, and it is just such a lovely reader. You never know what kind of art you're going to get out of it, and I just love seeing the depictions and then reading about the artist's perspective. So this is the deck that I chose as my tasting menu because it gives you a taste of these fantastic artists and their fantastic, beautiful work. So I love it so much. It is beautiful. Oh my goodness, I love it. Next up is the Right Wine, an oracle that perfectly complements your tarot meal. I selected 2 just as Candy Soul and Soil selected 2. So first of all, for red I selected the Vintage Wisdom Oracle. This is again a deck that I have loved for so long, and I've only recently picked this deck up. So I'm so thrilled to have this because it just works so beautifully with other decks. I think so many decks this pairs beautifully with. I love the art, the collage, and the keywords as well. I think it's a beautiful deck that could be used for so many different readings. And I just love the sort of nod to the ancestors and the archaic. I love it so much. It's beautiful and it feels really deep. There's a lot of like warm, plummy red tones, some beautiful art as well included. I'm just getting to know this deck. I'm just pairing it with different decks and enjoying reading with it at the moment. But this for me is the perfect red wine. This is like a rich burgundy or a Malbec, you know, it's just, oh, beautiful, absolutely stunning. And my white wine is the Angel Oracle by Ambica Waters. Again, this is another that's fairly new in my collection. I wanted to have an Angel Oracle besides the Angel Oracles that I already have. I have the Mother Mary Oracle by Doreen Virtue, and I have the Mother Mary Oracle by Alana Fairchild as well, and I also have the Archangel Gabriel Oracle, but I wanted one that was more general, and I didn't want really a Doreen Virtue one. Again, I wanted this one. I had seen it in on a few people's channels. I love the gold, I like the messages, and I love the art. It feels like a rich Chardonnay, but at the same time some of the cards feel like they could work for sort of like a more sharp English wine, you know, like a gooseberry scented wine, because I feel like I haven't worked with angels all that much, but there is something quite sharp about working with them, as I understand some of them, and you know, it's not all light and fluffy is what I'm saying. It's not all like fluffy as some people would think, and I like this deck because it doesn't come across like that either. So yeah, I think this is a really enjoyable deck to work with, and this is my white wine. So next up is the Fancy Dessert, cards that remind you of an elaborate wedding cake. I did think of the Nicoletta Ciccoli because there are so many sweet, beautiful looking cakes and things in that deck, but it just didn't feel quite posh enough to be a posh dessert. So I went for the Revival Art Tarot, and this is the first edition. There's something about this that just feels so classic. This deck is by Taroko Studios, and it references a lot of different art by different artists. And it feels very posh and refined and delicate. It feels like a really dark chocolate mousse or something, you know, like a really, really beautiful tort or something. It's just stunning. Stunning art. As my mum is an art teacher and I feel like I've got art in my blood a little bit, this deck for me was a must. So I'm really glad that I have it in my collection. It's just beautiful, beautiful pieces of art. And finally I added one more prompt, which is coffee and petit fours. Again, because I worked in a French bistro and they always had coffee and petit fours, so I wanted to pick something that would work. So when I think about coffee after a meal, I always think about coffee that's not got milk in it. I think it's because my father always used to have espressos or just a filter coffee or just an Americano without milk. And so the scent of that really reminds me of when my parents would have dinner parties when I was younger and I would have to go to bed early, you know, and I could always smell the coffee wafting up the stairs, and beautiful dark chocolates, you know, petit fours, little truffles and stuff. And so for coffee though, it made me think of like really dark, deep coffee that's kind of got like something sharp about it, something spiky about it. And it made me think of the Tarot of the Vampires. So this is the one by Ian Daniels. And this is obviously such a perfect Halloween-y deck, and it's one that a lot of people bring out at that time of year, Samhain sort of time of year, and I actually picked mine up around September time last year, so I was able to use it for Samhain, and I used it so much in the dark days of winter actually, and I love working with this deck. And Phantasmagoria is a beautiful book that goes alongside as well. There's something so like this would jolt you awake, you know, and even the back, it reminds me of like a beautiful milkless coffee. And to go alongside, little mini petit fours that are sweet but also dark and delicious, like really dark chocolate, you know. And I went for my mini Bohemian Gothic by Baba Studios. This is such a beautiful deck, and I just wish I had picked up the full size as well, but I ummed and ahed, and then it went out of print and the mini was all that was available. I had to actually edge this deck myself, but it is stunning, and I'm hoping to get my hands on the Victorian Romantic Tarot when it comes back out into print this year. I also snoozed on the Mythical Creatures, and I really regret that as well now. So I think that I've learnt my lesson. I recently saw Rachel at the Cackling Moon talking about this and how, you know, she really regrets it when she snoozes on a Baba Studio deck, and so, you know, whenever any one of them comes out, it's just, yeah. So I think that's just what I'm going to do, except I have to say the anthropomorphized cats in dresses don't really appeal to me. But this deck I love, and the Victorian Romantic is a must. So yeah, I am definitely not going to snooze on those decks anymore now that obviously they are closing for business in a few years. So, but this just feels like beautiful chocolates wrapped in posh packets, you know, foiled packets. This just feels perfect to go with my coffee. So I have come to the end of this really, really fun tag by Paper Moon, inspired by Candy, Soul and Soil. And I've had so much fun answering these prompts and showing you some of my decks. I've really enjoyed it. If you made it to the end of the video, then thank you so much. Leave a little crystal ball emoji for me in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please do click the like button and give the video a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel and you'd like to see more around tarot, witchcraft, magic, spiritual content, then please do think about subscribing. And while you're subscribing, don't forget to hit that little bell notification, because that's how YouTube is going to let you know when I create and upload videos just like this one. So with all of that said, thank you again so much for joining me. Thank you so much to Paper Moon for this tag, and to Candy for the inspiration for the tag. So thank you again so much for joining me. I hope that you stay well and safe, and I look forward to seeing you in another video really soon. Take care. Bye. Mwah.